So, welcome to this episode of the Willingdon on Mission podcast. My name is John, one of the pastors at Willingdon Church. This month, we have a special treat. Our missionaries of the month are named S and J. Those aren't actually not their real names; they're their initials. But S and J serve in Southeast Asia, and we're using initials just for some security purposes. So, welcome to this episode, S and J.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So we're looking forward to getting to know you over the course of this next few episodes. For this particular episode, would you just give us a glimpse of who you are? What are some of the important markers along your life journey that have gotten you up to this point?
Hey. So I'm S, and this is my wife Jay, and we'll each share a little bit about what's led us up to this point. And so, yeah, I'm from Canada, from Niagara region, and yeah, I grew up in the church, and um, yeah, when I was 18, I had the opportunity to go on my first ever missions trip, and I found myself in Thailand. And I had never thought about going overseas before, but for me, that was the time when, for the first time, I realized that like God is real and He speaks and He cares intimately about myself and about those around me, and He is drawing people to Himself. And so, yeah, it was through this experience in Thailand that God really captured my heart and my life. And I thought, like, okay, if God is real, if He's actually moving in this world, then I want to be a part of that. And so, yeah, for me, after this month-long experience in Thailand with the action program from Multiply, I went to Bible school. I attended CBC and studied intercultural studies. And so I was there for 4 years. And for one of those years, I was also sent overseas for an internship and ended up back in Thailand through the Trek program, which is also through Multiply. And so for me, that was just a reaffirming time when I got to test missions again and felt like, okay, this feels good, this feels right. I feel like this is where God is leading me, and so I went back to Canada after my year in Thailand, and I completed my Bible school, and then I signed up for long-term missions and was ready to go. And I thought, okay, the Lord is clearly calling me to Southeast Asia. And during my training time, I was presented with the opportunity to serve in France.
France is a lot different than Southeast Asia, hey?
It couldn't be much more opposite in any way. So yeah, I was shocked, and it took a couple of weeks for me to process and to pray. And um, yeah, throughout this journey, I felt like God was inviting me to submit to the leadership I said I was submitting myself to when I joined the organization, and uh, and I felt like God was asking me to say yes to this wild adventure and go to France. And so I ended up spending 2 years in France working with North African immigrants, and it was a challenging time, but it was also a wonderful time. And yeah, it was a really growing experience.
Yeah.
And we actually got reconnected during that time because I was working in Germany at the time, also as part of the Multiply team, doing short-term missions programs while I was studying education. I had done Trek before starting my education program. 1 year after S was in Thailand. And I had been sent to the same people, the same team in Thailand, and we sort of had a similar experience, even though at that time we didn't really connect much. But when S was then in France and I was in Germany working at the office at the same time, we sort of reconnected. And that's also then like we got married, and S was about to finish his term in France, and then we kind of decided that maybe he could come to Germany for a while I was finishing my education. So after 2 years of French, you studied German. the language of love. And I was finishing up education. For me, that was a way in which I saw God maybe use me in long-term missions, because during my time in Thailand, we were often asked to teach, and I felt like I mean, I'm not a native speaker, and I always felt like I'm just this random person pretending that I can teach English when I really don't, and I really can't. But through this degree, maybe it'll help me gain access into countries that are otherwise difficult to reach. And for me, similar to you, during short-term missions is when God really called me into this long-term journey with Him. And so when we connected and got married, we always had this in the back of our minds that this is something that we're pursuing. And we were thinking about different options, because at that point we were working with different people groups in different places. And we just kept coming back to the fact that even though we're from different continents, God had given us a very similar experience in Thailand. And at that time in Thailand, we had not just worked with Thai people, we had also worked with Myanmar immigrants. A lot of them had come to Thailand actually illegally and worked their way through the different systems and ways to try and make a living. We knew very little of the country at that time, like at all. But we had met a few of these refugees and a few of these workers. A lot of them worked in different factories, and we're just fascinated by their stories and how they had found God in the midst of great challenges. And so we reconnected with the people we met at the time and were serving with at the time. And they had actually now moved to Myanmar, which was opening up in many ways. This was the year 2018 when we reached out, 2019, and Myanmar had become this new tourist destination. It seemed to be opening up after decades of being a very closed country and with raging civil wars and whatnot. And so this team had moved to Myanmar and was inviting us to join them. And to contribute to what they were doing with their work in the country with like a coffee company, but also with their ministry. And we prayed about it and talked to our elders about it, and it just seemed like a really good fit. And we were very happy with our decision. And so in 2019 is when we were sent out for the first time to Myanmar, and moved there in early 2020. And we got there right the week before COVID made international travel shut down completely all over the world. So we were some of the last people to really even get into the country. And after that, everything was shut down. People were not very excited to meet foreigners at the time, and groups were not gathering at all. So it wasn't the easiest time to learn a new language and connect with the community. But we also see God's grace in that, because that year was very crucial for us in many ways. And so COVID was happening, and then also our team members, they left at that time for a home assignment. And then because of COVID, like they couldn't come back in. So we're sort of like on our own a little bit. And then the craziest of all things happened in February of 2021. There was a military coup, and that completely changed everything about this place and about how the country felt to us and everyone in the country. Like we just witnessed like despair. I don't think I've ever really like talked to people and just sensed that they're despairing. Like to us, this was obviously a new experience, but people in Myanmar, they knew what this meant. And in the course of the following years, it obviously also happened the way everyone thought. And that is war and oppression and like a lawless land, and just shutting down all the opportunities and all the hopes of all the young people that had just been sort of like even, awakening in the years before. So that happened in February. I had a medical emergency, and we were trying to figure out how to get this done in Myanmar, and the doctors literally just kind of told us, get out of this place. At that time, peaceful protesters were being shot every day in our city. There were nationwide protests, and it was starting to develop into a full-blown war. And there was no way for us to get treatment and even just to figure out what we're doing now. And so we found ourselves back at my parents' place in Germany in their basement after our church had sent us out for like a 10-year commitment to Myanmar. And we had left, a lot of our hopes behind, and we're just in many ways like really devastated, mostly for the people, obviously, because that was a crazy time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we found ourselves in Germany trying to figure out what are we going to do next. And so we spent a little bit of time just praying and thinking and looking through different options. And we had felt like this was a wonderful, terrible introduction to Myanmar. But it really showed us the reality of the country. And so we needed some time to regroup and think of whether or not this was where the Lord was continuing to call us and what that could possibly look like in the future. And so, we decided to take a little, put a pause on our Myanmar plans for a season. And so.
Yeah, and that was also the time, like, interestingly enough, we got an offer at that time from LCC University in Lithuania, which is a Christian university serving students from more than 60 different countries. So this was not on our radar when we went to Myanmar, obviously.
It is so very different than Myanmar.
Yeah,
so very different.
Again, like it felt like such a detour, or like it felt so different from what we had originally set out to do. But at the same time, it kind of was a 2-year contract or commitment that they asked us for. And we felt like 2 years is a good time to invest ourselves into this new project, something completely different, like to even just get our minds off some of the more traumatic experiences we've had, and work with students from different cultures and countries, and use our skills, use our experience to help them adjust into this life at university. And then as also I
was able to study at the university as well. I did a master's degree in international management with the perspective of, if we were ever to return to Myanmar, then we would need to have a legitimate reason to be in the country. And so, they were getting more and more strict. They made it illegal to enter Myanmar for NGO purposes. And so that was now a closed door. And so the only option to return would be business. And so we felt like maybe one of us should have a little bit of understanding about business. We should learn a little bit, grow a little bit in that area. And so, it was a really great opportunity, to study and work with students and just grow in that way.
Yeah, we grew in many, like, it really helped us process, but also grow, because I was at the same time working as an intercultural education coordinator. And that allowed me to really dive deeper into topics that I knew on the surface level, but in order to teach that and to help others, to help students with these sort of issues, I had to really read and study myself. And it helped me a lot to actually think through a lot of things. And at the same time, we just had the most amazing experiences with students in our own home and on campus. And we really felt like this was not just something random. This was something that God had given us. And now looking back, we feel like we would have not wanted to miss this opportunity that came out of nowhere.
And it really feels like, looking back on our journeys and on our lives, like all of these like ups and downs, and like it's gone so different from how we've expected our life to go. We just like when I was younger, I thought, okay, I'm heading to Southeast Asia. I'm going to serve the Lord there. And then there was like detour after detour. And then we finally made it here together. And then there's just like chaos breaks out and it's another wild detour. And so we could look back on it and think like,
It went
man,
terribly wrong.
it's been absolutely awful. Where was God in all of it? Or we could look back on it and think like, wow, like the grace of God in all of it. Like truly, we feel so honored that He's been in it and leading us through it and invited us to different ministries along the way. And we've been able to learn so much and grow so much and see so much. And
and maybe to sum it up just in a way, we were thinking about this the other week with our friends here in Myanmar as well. And we're kind of reflecting on it and saying, a lot of people feel like the biggest step of surrender is when missionaries actually leave, or like when they say yes to the calling and then they leave and set out to another country and they leave their homes behind or something like that. And we have found that to us, like that was not a difficult yes, because this is what we wanted to do with our lives. Like to us, maybe staying home would have been more difficult. We really like this was what we were passionate about. We were just following also what we were passionate about. What we found much more difficult was actually to lay down and surrender our vision of what we thought that life would look like, or how we thought that ministry would go, or what we dreamed about when we set out. Like to lay that down, sometimes even now daily, is challenging. And at the same time, so worth it for us because we see, wow, God had more in store for us than we could have asked or imagined, which was actually our verse, the
wedding verse.
Yeah, wedding verse. So it's been very true. Yeah, so this has been our wild journey.
Awesome. So I love that. So there's a little bit of Europe calling in there too somehow, right? Like there's, but it's not your sense of primary calling, but God has called you into Europe a number of times already.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks. This is a really fun glimpse into how the Lord has brought you up to this point. And for those of you who are watching and listening, you might be like, well, yeah, but what are they doing? Where are they and what are they doing? We're going to get to that. And but we wanted to just lay the groundwork of, okay, here's some of the life journey. Here's some of the ways that the Lord has called, directed, provided, sustained. And so thanks, S&J, for giving us that glimpse. All right, for those of you who are watching, stay tuned for episode 2 in the near future. God bless you all.